we are all about developing your spiritual gifts. And that's why we're all here. But is that why we're all here, right? The big here. Why are we here? And expressing your spiritual gifts is part of that, but is that the whole picture, right? I think it's part of it is sort of a means to an end. And the end is really to express your higher self, right? To be more connected, to be more of who you fully are. And the big question is how? How are we supposed to do that, right? It's this, and there's been lots of, every culture has their own prescription for how you're supposed to do that. And there's all kinds of religions, there's all kinds of philosophies about how we're supposed to be more of our higher self. And the belief that I always had growing up was that you had to be good in order to be good, right? You had to do good to be good. That it was through our behavior was how we were going to become more like, be like your higher self. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So this was the sort of mantra in my head as a child growing up. And I think this is a big part of our culture. This is what we teach our children. This is a really an accessible way of entering into spirituality. And it makes a lot of sense, is that's how you have a society that gets along. Is everybody is trying to be good. We have more conformed behavior. And I had tons of books on my bookshelf growing up as a kid that all reinforced this belief system. So one of them was called The Frog and the Prince. And so everybody know that story, The Frog and the Prince? In the story, there's a princess who has a favorite golden ball, and she's playing down by the wall, throwing her ball into the air, and she drops it into a well. And she's sobbing by the well, she's crying, she's so sad, and a frog hears her, and he says, I could get your ball for you. And she says, please, Mr. Frog, would you please do that for me? And he says, I will do that for you if you promise to be my very best friend and to let me eat off your plate and sleep on your pillow and kiss me goodnight. And she says, you bet anything, just get me my ball. So he swims down to the bottom of the well and he finds the ball and he brings it back up to the princess. But the minute he gives it back to her, she takes off and she heads back to the castle and she never thinks about the frog again. So that night, the princess is sitting at dinner with her dad, and it's a lovely banquet. And she hears a knock, knock, knock at the door, and it's the frog. And the frog says, Princess, dear princess, I'm here for dinner. You promised me that you'd let me eat off your plate and sleep on your pillow and kiss me goodnight, and we would be very, very best friends. And the princess really doesn't want the frog to come in, but the king says, did you actually make this promise? Is this true? And she says, yes, I did. And he says, well, you need to honor your promise. You need to do what you said. So the princess lets the frog come in, and the frog eats off her plate. And that night she goes up and goes to bed, and she hears a knock, knock, knock on her door. And it's the frog. And he says, dear princess, I'm here to be your very best friend. And I ate off your plate, and now I'll sleep on your pillow, and you can kiss me goodnight. And the princess, she opens the door, and she's getting angrier and more disgusted by this horrible frog. And she leans down to pick up the frog. The princess takes the frog, and she hucks it across the floor. And it lands against the wall and magically becomes a prince. And to me, this made no sense at all, because I thought, well, she was really bad, right? She threw the frog, and here she gets the prince. I thought, this is a really dumb book. I hate this book. And so I never liked this book, and so I only read the other version. What is interesting about this story, looking back on it as an adult, is now I understand. If you reframe the story and understand that everything in the story is actually you, in this original version, that you are the frog and that you are the king. And it reframes this entire story to be a story about healing. And that's the true meaning behind the original version of The Frog and the Prince, is that in this story, all of the things that you don't like about yourself, all of the things that you resist, all the things that you have anxiety about yourself, those are all the frog. And they're down in the bottom of the well, and they're gross, and you hate them, and you don't want to look at them. But they're persistent, and they keep coming up, and at your dinner, they're knocking at the table, right? And at your bedroom door, they're knocking on the door, and they want to sleep on your pillow, and they want you to nurture them. They want you to face them, to take care of them. And the king is your higher self saying, you know what? When you came to this earth, you came on purpose to face your frogs. That's why you're here. You made that promise to yourself. You promised that you were going to come in and face your frogs. So he's going to hold you to your promise. Right? That's you. You are the king and you are the frog. So the interesting thing about this is that as the princess is behaving so badly and she throws that frog, what she's doing is she's taking that anger, she's taking all those feelings that she experienced in seeing the frog, and she's expressing them, right? She's throwing them across the room. And that's the important thing about that. It's such a violent, why would they put that in the story? Throwing the frog against, there's no PETA back then. But she throws the frog. So what is the purpose of that except to illustrate a point, right? In big, large letters, is that feelings, emotions have to be expressed. And it's through the pulling it up out of yourself and releasing it is how we clear it, is how we release those feelings. So it's part of how we heal ourselves, is through that. So when you come into this earth, you come in with a certain number of frogs, right? You're going to come in and it's going to be, these are the frogs that I'm going to try to clear in this lifetime. And if you really bust your rear, you can pull those frogs up out of the well and you can express them and release them and get rid of that energy out of your system. And those frogs will be persistent. So if you don't clear it the first time, your guides will be putting together a whole set of life circumstances to pull up that frog for you to see it and look at it and have dinner with it. But if you repress those feelings, if you don't engage those feelings, if you're angry, if you walk away, if you leave that relationship, whatever it is, then the frog doesn't get expressed. But if you clear that frog, if you face it, right? What is the acronym, Brenda? You face it.
Face it, embrace it, allow it, and then release it.
Thank you. If you do that, fear your frog, then the frog, that feeling is released and the fear is gone. The frog is gone. But nobody is here on vacation, and frogs are persistent, so a new frog will come up. So as you're going along your healing journey, if you are really working it, if you get rid of the first frog, then a new one, the next one will be served up to you. And you can continue to make progress on your spiritual path, because what we're doing here, this is not a vacation place for anybody, right? This is more like a spiritual gym. And we're here working it out. And we're trying to do as much work as we can while we're here. So the more that you can clear in this lifetime, the higher you're going to raise your spiritual level, the closer you're going to be to your higher self. So clear one, the next one is going to come up. And that sounds a little discouraging at first, except I want to tell you that as you're making your progress, as you're doing this, you do benefit along the way. I think all the stories about, hey, I cleared my blocks and now I drive a Ferrari and I live in a mansion and my life is perfect and there's nothing wrong ever, and do what I do and your life will be perfect. I just don't think that's true. What I think is true is that you do all the work, and what becomes different is that the things that bother you before no longer trigger you. Is that you move through your life with less friction. The more work that you do on yourself, the better your life becomes, because you feel differently about it. Because all the things that used to really grate on your nerves or really make you angry, they just don't anymore. You can hear it, you can be in the room with your family, and it doesn't bother you at all, right? And it's the experience of a different kind of spiritual progress. And it's not necessarily the easy road that if you follow these steps, you will materialize amazing abundance and lotto tickets. It's more like do the work, and the kind of inner peace that you get, the sort of friction-free life that you get, is imagine your life but without the frustration. Imagine it with an easier access to love, an easier access to connection to others, where you see others, the people who used to trigger you, you now see them with compassion and understanding, and you feel great about it. So it is a beautiful thing.